so I took the opportunity to save up a few pennies and kind of take the plunge, as they say. So I'm going to kind of chat about that today, show a little bit of gameplay footage, and just chat about VR in general, the future, and things like that, and why generally I'm just super excited about the possibilities. First thing I'd say is it's incredibly difficult to describe virtual reality to somebody who hasn't actually experienced it. I will attempt to do so later, but kind of, it's something which you really need to kind of check out for yourself if it interests you. But I'll also explain a bit about how you can do that later as well. But right now, let's kind of go back to the beginning. So, virtual reality is not a new concept. It's been around for quite some time, maybe over 20 years. Obviously, back then it was a lot lower tech, a lot bulkier, a lot less consumer friendly, and the sort of thing you'd see in kind of arcades and things like that, or kind of theme parks, that type of thing, because it wasn't really something which you could have at home. Also, it took a lot of computing power to run, and was fairly low resolution, but nevertheless, even back then it had a cult kind of following, and people were saying it was going to be the next big thing, but I think it was a bit too ahead of its time. You fast forward like 15-20 years, and you get to maybe 2-3 years ago, and the Oculus Rift was really the first VR experience which kind of got everyone excited about it again. It had really been off in the wilderness somewhat. 3D was something which has come in through films and a little bit in games with things like the Nintendo 3DS and stuff like that, but generally, from what I see of other people's experiences of 3D, is that they generally just don't like it very much. Tends to give people headaches and stuff like that. People who are very sensitive to it, and yeah, so generally a lot of people I know who have 3DSs will turn off the 3D or put it on very low if it's necessary. And I work in a cinema as my day job, and I can tell you that 3D redemptions on films are very much down on 2D. It's really only kids' films which seem to attract more attention, I guess, because kids kind of like the gimmicky side of things, whereas adults are just, A, reluctant to pay a bit more money, and B, just not that into it, I guess. But anyway, so yeah, the Oculus Rift was the first thing which kind of was piquing people's interest again. It appeared on Kickstarter, and it got backed quite significantly, and they brought out these kind of development kits, and nowadays you can actually purchase the full consumer product, which is what I did. As I said, it came out in the UK on the 20th of September. I think it's been out in America for a lot longer than that, maybe all the way back in March, April time, I think. And it cost £550, which is a lot of money. The whole VR thing is that it is a lot of money, and I'll kind of go into the pluses and minuses of that later. I just wanted to explain a bit of the background first. Now, there are also different options for the VR. So, the Oculus Rift is one kind of brand. You also have the Htc Vive, which is a conjunction between the electronic maker HTC, or mainly mobile phone maker, and Steam. And you have the Gear VR, which is kind of like a posh Google Cardboard, but for Samsung phones. It kind of turns a phone into a kind of virtual reality headset, but it's fairly weak. You have the PlayStation VR, which is coming out fairly soon for use with PlayStation 4s, which is, I'd say, down the cheaper end of the market, but it's still a good £300-400, which, you know, for most people is not really cheap at all. And lastly, you have the good old Google Cardboard, which basically is a kind of cardboard thing which you can pop your smartphone into and kind of approximate the experience of virtual reality through certain apps and things like that. I think it's only £5, so it's that kind of thing where if you were quite interested in it but obviously didn't want to take the massive plunge, it's not a bad alternative. I actually have one myself, and it's quite good fun, you know. As I said, it's kind of £5, and I guess it's Google's attempt to kind of pique people's interests in this, because they obviously think that it's going to be massive in the future. Personally, I do too. So, as I said, I picked up an Oculus Rift. Now, the HTC Vive is probably a more complete experience. Well, it is a more complete experience. Virtual reality, basically, you put a headset on, and what you see through the lenses makes you kind of, it creates a 3D world, and you feel like you're in that 3D world, essentially. When you move your head around, it uses infrared, it tracks your head position, relays that information, and wherever you're looking, you know, the camera will kind of move around too. So it gives you that sense that you're in the world. That's essentially what the Oculus does. It also kind of makes things 3D, so everything has a great kind of depth to it, a nice feel to it, and it's just exceptionally immersive, is the thing I'd say about it. You really feel like you're kind of in that world, and you can get quite lost sometimes as well. Now, there are pluses and minuses to that. Some people who suffer from motion sickness and things like that, VR probably won't be for them, because while there are some experiences which are, you know, very minimal kind of movement around, there are plenty which are quite intense. You know, things like racing games, flight games, stuff like that. You know, it really tricks your brain into thinking that you're there doing these things, and your brain will react in that way. I'm a person who suffers a lot from vertigo, and I can tell you now that at certain moments in games, I am absolutely terrified, because I can see a huge drop or a cliff or something, and it really feels quite real. I'll go into later as well, that's actually quite an interesting thing as well. But anyway, that's kind of what the Oculus Rift does. Now, it has some kind of wireless controllers coming out for it soon, called the Oculus Touch, which kind of approximate your hands, as it were, so you can gesture around and do things like that, which will kind of help complete the experience. The HTC Vive already has that. It also tracks movement within a certain area, so you can actually walk around as well, so it's a more complete experience. It is, however, about £250 more expensive, so, you know, and you need a good size room to actually do it in, you know, a nice clear big room. I don't have that space, which was the main reason I didn't get it. I don't think I'm going to get that sort of space anytime soon, so but in the future it's certainly something I would like to experience, because for all intents and purposes it does seem to be a more complete kind of package. Imagine, if you will, with the Vive, playing something like Minecraft, wandering around, you're feeling like you're actually walking around, being able to kind of reach out and not touch the block, but kind of interact with the block and feel like it's just there in front of you, and then, you know, place it, move it, place it, and, you know, it's an experience which you just can't replicate. You know, sitting in front of a screen with a keyboard and mouse, you know, as much fun as the games are like that. There's something very special about VR. Now, it's not going to be for everyone, of course. I've already said that people who suffer from motion sickness will really struggle with it. And, you know, some people just like to play simple games, or they enjoy, you know, sitting in front of a monitor playing games. So I still very much enjoy that. You know, I'm not suddenly going to just only play VR games, but as a kind of supplement and to try something a bit different, it's fantastic. And as the software kind of catches up with the hardware, because ultimately any device is only as good as the software you have on it, I think it's going to bring some really unique and fantastic experiences to the world of gaming. But not only to the world of gaming. I'll go into later about other applications that these VR headsets can have. So I think one of the things which I was slightly worried about when I picked up my Oculus Rift was setting it up. You know, how fiddly is it going to be? You know, how tricky are things going to be? Is it going to be like, you know, oh, I've, you know, accidentally knocked the sensor, and is it going to be, you know, that everything's uncalibrated now and stuff like this? And surprisingly, it's incredibly easy. The actual initial setup took me probably just under an hour, and that includes, you know, taking everything out of its packaging, you know, plugging it into my computer, and you know, running through the kind of initial setup program, which was really, really simple, very intuitive. One thing I will say is that with any of the kind of PC, the Rift and the Vive, you do need a fairly good PC to run these on. They have specs on their respective websites which tell you, and there are actually kind of little test like performance benchmark things you can get. There's one on Steam and there's one on the Oculus website which will kind of tell you whether or not your PC is capable of running it. I'm lucky enough to have a pretty good PC, so I haven't had any issues, which is nice. But if you can imagine what your kind of PC has to run, essentially is two different monitors at the same time, which are running two different pictures. So in the Oculus Rift's case, it runs two different like lenses, which are 1080 by 1200 resolution. So it's like having two monitors, and they have a 90Hz refresh rate. So you have to have a very high frame rate on VR, so that you don't basically feel sick. You know, because obviously in real life, our eyes have a high frame rate, and you know, it's what helps everything become fluid. If you have a lower frame rate and it's not fluid, you basically will feel really sick from it. So you do need a good PC to be able to keep up that frame rate on there as well, which, you know, is quite important, I think, and it's important you kind of check that stuff out. I don't know what the PlayStation, how that's going to run, or the specs of that. I have to wait and see. But I know it does come with a little kind of processing box with it to kind of beef up the PlayStation, so it doesn't just run off the PlayStation hardware. But I know it is probably going to be slightly lower resolution than the Oculus or Rift, basically, which is to be as expected. You know, PlayStation games generally run, you know, slightly lower resolution, slightly lower frame rate than PC games, so that's nothing new. It is obviously like £100, £150 cheaper, so, you know, it swings around abouts. So yeah, as I say, the setting up is really quite easy. What surprised me as well is that the actual headphones which come attached to the Oculus Rift are actually pretty good. I thought they'd be quite trashy, but they provide quite good surround kind of sound, which is again important within the kind of VR headset area, because you know, if you're kind of moving your head around, the sound needs to adapt to where it's coming out. You know, if you hear something to the left and suddenly you turn off to the left, then that sound's going to be coming towards you, you know, not to your left again. So it does a very good job of that, I think, and it surprised me that the headphones were as good a quality as they were, because they don't look like they're very high quality, but you know, I guess that's good. And in terms of comfort as well, I think it's super comfy. Now, one thing I will say is it weighs just under half a kilo. Now, that's not really a lot, but obviously, for me personally, I'm 6'2" tall, so how can I put this politely? Well, my neck muscles are going to be bigger than somebody who's, say, 5 foot tall. Okay, so half a kilo to me is not very much at all, and I have no problem, you know, having that on my head for, you know, an hour. If you were perhaps a lot smaller, half a kilo would weigh more to you, if that makes sense, so it might be more uncomfortable. In terms of the way it fits, it's quite comfy. It has quite a nice way of being able to take it off quickly and put it on fairly quickly. The front is kind of spring loaded, so you kind of pull the front forward and then slip it off, and then you do the reverse to kind of put it back on again, and it kind of grips to your face, but not in a horrible kind of oh, this is really tight kind of way. More like a nice comfy pair of like over-ear headphones, which, you know, just fit on nicely. So I haven't had a problem with it being uncomfortable at all, to be honest with you. I've played 4 different games on it so far. I've played a little bit. I wouldn't say I've put in tons of hours, but I've played 4 games, and they're all very different types of games as well. So the first one I played was called Lucky's Tale, which, and I'll show some bits of gameplay of it as well, and some pictures, which is a kind of 3D platform game. I think something like Mario 64, something like that. Now, I think if this game wasn't a virtual reality game, it would be very average run-of-the-mill. It's also important to point out that on the Oculus Rift, it's free, so I don't pay anything for it. But what's fantastic about it is the way it feels. It feels like you're watching a kind of a 3D animation, like you know, like the Wallace and Gromit movies or something like that. It makes you kind of feel like you're there in the kind of 3D area that they're kind of in, and it's really nice, and it kind of changes perspective as well. And you know, you run around as this little fox, bouncing on things, collecting coins. It's all very simple, but it plays really nicely. It runs very smoothly on my PC. There's no problems there, and despite it being classed as moderate in the comfortable section of the Oculus library, so it has 3 different ratings. It has comfortable, moderate, and intense. I had absolutely no problems playing it. The first time I launched into it, was the first game I played, and it really kind of blew my mind. Just the sensations you feel when you first start playing any sort of VR is so strange. I know I've used head tracking before in the past, but this just goes a lot further. You know, it really is immersive. That's how I would say it. If you can imagine, I think it's as big as leap as, say, jumping in and playing something like a 2D Mario game, and then coming in and playing like a 3D Mario game. Like that kind of wow jump, you know, is crazy. You know, imagine something like you're playing the original Grand Theft Auto, and then you jump into, you know, Grand Theft Auto 3 upwards. You know, you're just like, whoa, this is really different. You know, a lot more immersive. You know, just being able to kind of look around and kind of see everything, and it's pretty incredible. I'm very lucky I don't suffer from any sort of motion sickness. I mean, I'm sure I would do if it was really bad, but I'm not sensitive to that sort of thing, so I haven't had any problems at all with any of the games. Well, that much anyway. So yeah, that's Lucky's Tale. It's good fun, as I say. I'm definitely going to kind of play a bit more of it and go through it. It's, as I said before, it's very difficult to try to explain the experience. They are going to be doing like demonstration things in different shoe stores and stuff like that, where you can go along and try things out, and it's well worth trying. And as I say, the Google Cardboard also kind of does you a good job of the head tracking stuff and things like that. There's things like roller coaster, like simulation stuff like that on there. But to be honest with you, until you kind of put that headset on and jump into a game and start playing, there's, you can't really describe how that feels. It's an incredible feeling. It's really special. Next up, I played a game called Chronos, which has been very well critically acclaimed, as well. It's an RPG, and this does an interesting thing with the camera. So the camera is at a fixed point in every room, shall we say, every scene. Imagine the early Resident Evil games. However, you can move the camera using your head, so you can kind of tilt it around, move it up and down, that type of thing as well, and then you move around your character within that area. I haven't played too much of it, but it looks really nice, and I think it plays pretty well too, actually. So far I'm looking forward to kind of jumping into a bit more of it as well, and it's definitely on the low end scale of kind of motion sickness side of things. As I say, the camera doesn't move. I think what the way they kind of rated things was that there are kind of like the static cameras like this one where you can move things with your head. There are ones which kind of move a bit more, and there are ones where the whole world moves your camera, and that's the ones which can really affect you if you're sensitive. So that's something to bear in mind, definitely. I think the quite good thing is that even if you are slightly sensitive, there are games out there or experiences which can tailor towards you. So there might be some games where you're just like, I've got to stay away from that. It doesn't do me any good, or I can only play like 10-15 minutes of this game because it's quite intense. But there are other experiences on there, and lots of them, which are going to be tailored to the more comfortable kind of casual market. So there's lots out there for people, I think, at the minute, and that will only increase over time for sure. So next up, I played two games which aren't VR exclusive. So Lucky and Chronos are VR exclusive. You can't play those without a VR headset. Basically, it just wouldn't work, and I don't know, they would just lose a lot if you took them away. But I played Project Cars, which is a racing game. That was certainly slightly more on the intense scale. You can imagine kind of sitting in a car cockpit and racing around against other drivers at very fast speeds. Played really well. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll put some footage up of that kind of racing around as well. But really good. Really enjoyed it. There are other racing games. I think you can get Dirt Rally as well, which you play. And if I was being honest, I would definitely prefer playing Project Cars in VR than regularly. It just adds a real sense of immersion to it. I was racing around Laguna Seca, and you really felt like you were kind of going around the corkscrew when you did it. It wasn't just I actually had a real kind of adrenaline rush and a real kind of sense of almost a sense of fear, but not really bad fear, but just like that kind of just being on the edge of my seat as I was going around there, because even though I've played that track a lot of times on not just Project Cars but other things, because it's a real life track. I remember playing a lot in Gran Turismo, I think, so I know the track fairly well. But you know, it was a whole new experience just going around it. It felt like a whole new kind of track. Yeah, it was really cool actually. Just the fact that you can kind of just look around at different things, and you know, it's a really strange experience to begin with. Once you get used to it, though, you kind of jump into the world and you're there. You know, as I say, the sound is really good. The roar of the engines, you know, really gets you going. All you kind of would need, I guess, is just maybe put a fan in front of you and just blow air at you, which would probably give you a bit more sense of movement. I am joking, of course, that would be terrible. But yeah, it's an amazing experience. I can only imagine that if you had a proper steering wheel, which I don't have, then that would really add to it as well. That would be incredible, I think, as well. So I'm definitely going to play a bit more of that. It's not something I think I'd put up on the channel at all, but you know, just to kind of jump in and play around in, it's a really cool experience actually. The final game I played was Elite Dangerous. Now, I actually got some Elite Dangerous videos on this channel, but they're very early ones. I haven't done that much with it since. I do want to jump back in, and this was a very strange experience. The first thing I would say is, because I've played a lot of it on just normal 2D, you know, on my monitor, the sense of scale was so much bigger in VR. Like, everything just felt huge. The space, being in the space station, felt massive because I could actually, you know, just look around. Now I can look around in the game normally using the mouse, but you know, when you are kind of flying and you can just casually look up and around things, it gives you an immense sense of scale. It triggered my vertigo quite a lot as well when I was just out flying around the space station. It also it was a very intense experience when you do things like a roll and stuff like that. It can really kind of play with you a little bit. I can see people who really suffer from motion sickness would not like that at all. Even I was a bit like, whoa, you know, I don't want to be doing this too much spinning around. But it's something I'm keen to try more of, because it was such an intense experience. I don't think it's the sort of thing I could play for you know, an hour or two, but certainly to jump in and play 20 minutes, half an hour of it, and maybe do a mission or something like that, it would just be a really quite intense experience, I think, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all, because sometimes you want to have that you know, that real kind of like adrenaline rush, or you know, that slight bit of fear or nerves. You know, you can kind of feed off that. Sometimes you don't want that at all, but obviously there's the option to always just play it in 2D. You know, you can just take the headset off, it's not a problem. Just play it normally. I would say, because I've got a flight stick as well, that really added to it, because when you kind of look down you can see your hands on the flight stick, and that kind of moves to what you're doing, so it does feel very immersive that you're actually there. I will also say that I hadn't quite got the calibration right on it as well, so I was just kind of trying it out, and I think if I was a bit too far forward on it, if I had adjusted it so I was a bit further back and down, it perhaps wouldn't have been quite so intense for me, because it kind of, imagine it was a bit like being in a car, and instead of kind of being relaxed, leaning back in your chair, you were right up against the front windshield. That was kind of how it was. I hadn't quite set it up properly, and you know, that was obviously quite an intense experience when I was flying around. So yeah, I think I'll spend a bit more time to set it up properly, and kind of go around it a bit more. But I don't think it's something I would play long term. I could see it would give you an advantage it's easier to kind of fly around because you can check your surroundings and stuff like that. And I definitely would like to go down onto a planet and experience that in VR. But as I say, it did trigger my vertigo quite a lot. I was a bit like, whoa, this is, quite intense. But kind of talking about that, it's another reason, which it wasn't the reason I purchased the Oculus Rift, but it was kind of a side thing which I kind of picked up on, which is that I think VR is going to be very important for helping people who do have fears of things. So, as I said, with me it's heights, and I think there are certain games in there which deal a lot with heights and things like that, and I think if I kind of play through that, it will help me to deal with real life heights. Now obviously it's a different thing, and it's just a game, it's not actually real, but the sensations feel very much the same, trust me on that. And if you can kind of train your body to adjust to that, then I think it can help you. I noticed on the Oculus store there was a kind of spider simulation, so it was called Fearless, I think, and it actually kind of trained you to get used to spiders. That might sound horrific, but obviously it's there for a kind of therapeutic measure, and it's all carefully done, so it doesn't just drop you in a big pit full of spiders or something. But yeah, I could see that in the future it could really help people who've got quite bad medical conditions, maybe people who suffer from anxiety in kind of crowded places or claustrophobia and stuff like that, to just kind of help them deal with that sort of situation and deal with the kind of rising panic that you can kind of get from that sort of situation. And I think that'll be kind of very helpful, and I would be surprised if you do suddenly get kind of medical treatments prescribing things like this to people as well. Like, I think that could be very helpful, for sure. So one of the other things which also surprised me about it, I obviously picked up the Oculus for games, that's my main passion, but one of the things which really blew me away were the films on it. There's a film on there called Henry, which is a kind of imagine like a Pixar cartoon animation style film about a hedgehog. It really blew me away because it was so kind of immersive. Now obviously when you go to a cinema, you're sat in a cinema in a seat and there's loads of people around you and you're watching a film and all that kind of stuff, but this made you feel like you were there in the room. You could look around, you could kind of check around corners, things like that. You could look at the main character, or you could look at other things off to the side and discover that sort of thing. And it wasn't, if you've watched a 3D film, you know that you get that little split second sometimes where you're like, oh, there's something coming towards me, but this really makes you feel like you're actually there in there, and it's not a case of like, oh, something's coming towards me. It's like, no, everything is here. It was really good. I mean, the film was brilliant as well. It was only a short film, it was maybe 10 minutes long, but as somebody, as I said before, who works in a cinema, I genuinely think that this is going to be the future now. Not the immediate future, probably maybe 10 years down the time, but I think we're going to get to a point where people are sat in cinema screens with VR headsets on, experiencing this, because thinking about that, and that was obviously a short little animation film, but imagine a big kind of action movie where you're kind of riding alongside the main action star as he rides a motorbike or something like that along, or you're I don't know, in a back seat of a spacecraft or something as it flies through the stars in Star Wars or something. You're in a X-wing, with the main character. It's I could generally see that as just being an incredible experience. Now probably the technology isn't there yet, which is understandable, and it suits it more to an animation side because it's computer generated. So there works better. Obviously, it's easier to do. But yeah, I think I'm certain that that is what the future is going to be. There will still always be a place, I'm sure, for 2D films. You know, people do still love them. But that technology has been around for like, I don't know, 50 plus years, even more actually, probably 60, 70. And you just think that now, I think people are ready for the next step, the next evolution, as it were. Because I don't think 3D kind of took off that well. But I could see kind of VR movies really doing well, especially in a kind of home theatre setting. You know, instead of paying £20 for a Blu-ray, download a VR version for 15 or whatever. It kind of makes sense, I think. As I said, I don't see it being mainstream anytime soon, but certainly in a few years I'd imagine that because this is the other thing, the price of these headsets will go down. In the same way you see next generation or last generation games consoles go down in price. We will see a next generation Oculus Rift, a next generation Vive, and the price of these current ones will go down. It will be more accessible for people, and eventually, the price and components and things will go down. More and more people will have PCs or games consoles which are capable of running these VR headsets, to a good level, and it will become more mainstream. I'm 100% sure of that. There is too much money invested in this for it to flop now. Oculus Rift was bought by Facebook for $2 billion. Like, a company does not invest that much money if they are not expecting it to be a massive success. And when you see so many companies joining in, HTC, Valve, or Steam, PlayStation, Sony, Samsung, all these massive manufacturers are all kind of getting in there, and other companies will join soon as well. They don't take these decisions lightly, and they will probably lose money to begin with. Certainly, I was kind of reading that PlayStation are not expecting a great deal of VR units to be sold to people, but they want to be there and they want to be known as the console which does VR. So it's worth the initial investment, I guess, the initial losses to kind of be known as the place to be for the next generation after, when things get cheaper and better. Other kind of non-gaming applications for VR as well, you can get like tours of museums and cities and things like that on there, which look really good. Kind of documentary style things as well. I think it's just like really good kind of range of different software coming out, and as I say, it's not been out that long. I'd expect over the next 2-3 years to really build up a good library, and certainly more mainstream games are going to be kind of joining in the VR revolution. I've already seen that, I think it's just on the Vive, but that's starting to get Fallout 4 kind of integration. I saw a kind of video of someone playing it and it just blew their mind, and that is a game I would dearly love to play in VR. I was thinking about it today, and I mean, the next Elder Scrolls is 100% going to be playable in VR, without doubt, no shadow of doubt in my mind. It doesn't come out for 2-3 years, VR is going to be a lot more mainstream then, and it could just be something which is kind of, tacked on, or is an extra, in the way of like Elite Dangerous or Project Cars is. But as I say, they're really good experiences and they're new, so I'd imagine with a few years experience, a company like Bethesda could do wonders with it. And the thought of being able to play Skyrim in VR is really incredible. Terrifying, but incredible, that's for sure. So I think we'll see it grow. We can do more and more things with it. Oh, also, I know American Truck also supports VR. So I'll be looking forward to trying that out as well at some point. That seems like it's going to be a very passive experience as well. The whole game is a very passive experience, so I think it will be quite good fun with a VR headset. I don't know if I'll record any of it, but I'll certainly try it out and see how it goes. The thing with recording it is that obviously sometimes the movement could be a bit jerky because I'm moving my head to move around. You know, it's not like a controller or mouse where it's fairly smooth. Well, actually, it's a bit closer to a mouse, but just a fairly high sensitivity mouse. You know, so I don't know if for this particular channel it would make a brilliant series, but I will definitely do some videos on VR without a doubt. There's one series in particular which I'm gonna keep to myself at the minute, but I'm very excited about kind of playing through on that game. So you may see something fairly soon within the next week or so on that side of things. But as I was saying, yeah, the kind of non-gaming applications I've already said about kind of films coming in on there. Also social aspects as well. I was reading that, I can't remember who it is, it might have been Google or Facebook or someone is kind of developing a kind of social hub where you can go, you can meet people, you know, in VR, walk around as a kind of avatar. You can do things like play chess against them or other board games, stuff like that. You know, which is really nice. It's kind of an evolution of the online gaming kind of genre. You know, you can do that with your friends if you live miles away from your friend instead of just Skyping a call. You know, you can go sit down, you can play a game with them, you know, board game, and kind of feel more like you're in their presence as well, which is pretty cool, I think. And as that kind of moves on, the technology will increase and it will become better and better. Also in kind of industrial and professional kind of markets as well, a lot of architects are using it to kind of get more immersed into their kind of 3D models, so they can build a kind of 3D model on a computer of whatever it is they're building, and then they can use a VR headset to actually be inside that building, as it were, before it's even, you know, before any construction has even taken place, to kind of get a better feel for how it is, and, you know, even to the point where they can walk around and, you know, do different things. So that's a really good thing, and car designers apparently are trying it out as well, helping them to kind of build models and things like that as well. So there's a huge market for it, which I think will definitely, you know, not only from a gaming point of view, which is where it's most known, but I think it will take off because of the vast uses outside of gaming that it has. You know, I mean, a games console only has one use, is to play games on it. Sure, you can use it as a Blu-ray player, or, you know, you can stream films off Netflix or whatever, but essentially it plays games. You know, a VR headset for a professional, they can play games on it, they can watch movies on it, they can socialise with friends on it, they can use it for their work as well. You know, it just kind of transforms things as well. I just think the future is really exciting for VR, and jumping in there and experiencing how it is now. You know, it makes me really excited for what things are going to be like in a few years, because we see that technology evolves so quickly nowadays. If you look at something like a mobile phone, look at how they were 10 years ago. Like, you know, they had like a black and green screen 10 years ago. You know, they were probably just about bringing in colour mobile phones, and now look at them. You know, you can watch 2K, 4K movies on them. You know, they can do everything. My mobile phone has it's got more RAM, was more powerful than the computer I had like 4 years ago. You know, but it's like 1/100th of the size. You know, it's crazy how fast technology is evolving now, and when you kind of think about how big the industry will be, not just from a gaming very exciting, and I'm 100% sure that we're not going to see this fade away in the same way it did before. I'm 100% sure that this is not a fad, and I think those people who are saying, oh, it's just a fad, you know, they haven't experienced it, because I think as soon as you put that headset on and you have that experience, you know, even if you're like, oh, I'm not so sure about this, you can't deny that it's an intense experience and something which you can't really get from doing anything else. Sure, I could go out and I could race a car around the track, and that would be amazing, but it's not practical, and I will probably kill myself. So, you know, being able to do that in a VR environment is amazing, basically. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about it. I hope to put some content up, as I say, on my channel to show things off. The recording side of things is not great at the minute. I'll do my best to try and get the quality up as good as possible and things like that. But yeah, you know, I think it's just a really interesting it's going to be fascinating how this plays out, you know, where it goes, and I'm going to enjoy definitely playing through games on it. I will probably spend 80% of my time playing games normally, you know, in 2D on my monitor, enjoying that. I have no doubt about that. I didn't buy an Oculus Rift so that I could be like, right, all that time I spent gaming a week, I'm now going to be playing VR. But what I did was, I purchased it because I think the experiences I'm going to get are going to be something so different that it will kind of just inject a real freshness into the gaming market, because without a doubt, the way technology is nowadays, games haven't changed in the last 5 to 10 years really. Graphics have improved, but that's really it. We use pretty much the same input devices. You know, mouse and keyboard has been around for like 20 years plus, you know, 30 years probably. We still use the same input devices, we still play the same games, they just look better, you know, they have different ideas, they're bigger and more ambitious, but they're the same games, you know. Elite Dangerous nowadays is the same game as Elite back in, what, 1985 or whenever it was that it came out. It just looks a lot better, it plays a lot better, and it's got more depth to it, but it is the same game, it's the same experience, whereas VR takes you out and puts you in a different experience. And as you know, these fantastic game designers, as they take hold of these devices and harness that power and become really creative with them, you know, and I'm looking forward to all the small little indie games which come out of it, as well as the larger ones. You know, we'll start to see a revolution, I'm sure of that, I'm 100% sure of that, and it's exciting. Right now I wish No Man's Sky had VR support, that would be incredible, but alas, you know, not everything is going to. So yeah, thank you so much for staying with me. As I said before, if it's something you're interested in, you know, get down to somewhere that's having a demo, try it out, because it's incredibly difficult to describe. But I think it's fantastic, and there are going to be some people who it's not for at all. You know, you unfortunately may suffer from motion sickness and just not be able to handle it, and you know, it's unfortunate, but you know, there are still a lot of normal games out there which are great. So thank you so much for listening to this ramble. Hopefully it's been informative as well, giving out some of my views. I may do one a few months down the line when I've had more of a hands-on with the Oculus Rift, and maybe do a review style thing, but across the good and bad points to it. But we'll see. Anyway, thank you so much, and I'll catch you guys next time.